So I gotta ask, okay, so Anthony Bourdain, his death really hit me like a ton of bricks, and I could tell that it hit everybody that was in his periphery. But why do you think it is that the general public, people that weren't even necessarily huge followers of his work, took it so hard? Because it felt like the outpouring of grief on his death was just massive. What do you think it was specifically about him that made it so hard for everybody?
I think in part because he lived the life everybody fantasized of living.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember right after he died, maybe 6 months later, Dave Chappelle did his comedy special on Netflix. And the first joke he made was basically about this, which is, I mean, it's a joke, but he was speaking the truth, which is, Anthony Bourdain had this perfect life, and even that guy killed himself. What hope is there for the rest of us?
Hmm.
And I think that's part of it. And part of it is also just feeling like this was a friend of ours who we knew, who we spent time with, who, was funny and smart and engaging. And like that just doesn't compute. And I think part of what my job was to actually sift through everything and start to realize that not only were all the signs there all along that he was somebody who had flaws, he was always very open about it, but that what made him complicated actually made him great
Hmm.
too. That those things that his kind of restlessness, his romanticism, his deep curiosity, him being a seeker and trying to find the next thing, like those are things that made him great, but they're also things that really disconnected him from real life in a way. And it's hard to live your life on the road 270 days a year.
Well, and there was also, I think, this narrative that came up that everybody kind of, I don't know, made Aja Argento in some ways kind of the fall person for it. And I think the movie did a really good job explaining that in a lot of ways there was a lot more to it than that. And I appreciate that the film did a really well-rounded portrait of that. But I think everybody was just trying to find some easy excuse, I think, though, in some
Yeah.
ways.
I mean, I think if you go back and look, I mean, he had written about in his book Medium Raw about an incident where he almost drove off a cliff in the early 2000s when he was depressed. And it's a story he told off camera at one point. I saw, and even in Kitchen Confidential, there's some dark stuff in there.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I've read it.
I think,
Yeah.
I think the TV Tony we most remember is a slightly um, more mainstream Tony, but when you really read what he wrote, it can get very dark. And I think you start to kind of understand that those ghosts were there all along, depression was there all along. And I think the kind of overwhelming sentiment I got from those close to him was that his death was totally shocking, but not surprising.
I also think that Bourdain himself would have appreciated the kind of warts and all approach, and I think that his everybody that participated in the documentary seemed to feel that way as well. Was there an attempt, or not an attempt, but was there kind of an inclination at some point to soften his rough edges, or was it always going to be truthful?
No, I mean the opposite. I remember the first time I sat down with Chris and Lydia, his longtime producers, who did all of his television with him. The first time I met them, I started by talking about kind of what he meant to me, and that he was somebody who was like an ambassador of curiosity, who was showing us how people lived on the far side of the planet and humanizing them. And I was going on and on. At a certain point, they stopped me and said, "Yeah, but he could be such an asshole." and,
As
and I
can
felt
well.
like, yeah. And what I felt like, they were also giving me permission to be like, don't put Tony on a pedestal.
Mhm.
He would have hated that, and it's just not true. And I think somebody else told me, they said, I think Tony was the nicest asshole I ever knew. And, that he could be gruff, and in a way, I think the way he ran his show was the way he ran his kitchens, which is, the kitchen environment is a tough environment, especially, decades ago when
Yeah.
he came up. And I think that was kind of his mentality. It's like this kind of, we're all in it together, and people around him loved him, and they would have gone to the ends of the earth and did go to the ends of the earth with him. But they understood that he was tough because he was tough on himself too. He was just trying to make everything better, to push himself more, and consequently he pushed everybody else around him.
Well, thank you very much for your time. That was excellent, and I thought the movie was amazing.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks.
It was almost never about food. It was about Tony learning how to be a better person.
You're probably going to find out about it anyway. So here's a little preemptive truth-telling. There's no happy ending.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Chef Anthony Bourdain.
Anthony Bourdain.
Anthony Bourdain, the renowned chef and best-selling author of Kitchen Confidential.
All the TV chefs are so cuddly and adorable, you know, maybe I'm the antidote or something.
Has a new program, Parts Unknown.
1 minute I was standing next to a deep fryer, and the next I was watching the sunset over the Sahara. What am I doing here? I said earlier that I was going to tell you the truth. This is part of it.
It was almost never about food. It was about Tony learning how to be a better person.
When he threw himself into something, he threw himself completely.
Why am I here? Am I insane?
He was like, life's about finding a cliff worth jumping off. I'm gonna look for something feral and wild.
He was a traditional romantic.
Reality was never going to live up to exactly how he pictured it.
Hey, what's up, man?
He was always rushing to get into the scene. He was rushing to get out of the scene, to go somewhere next, even if he had nowhere to go.
He was definitely searching for something.
You were successful, and I am successful, and I'm wondering, are you happy?
I know how hard it must have been for him to reach out to someone and be like, hey man, I'm not doing well.
Nothing feels better than going home. And nothing feels better than leaving home. The bittersweet curse.
Travel isn't always pretty. You go away, you learn. You get scarred, marked, changed in the process.
You inspire so many people with the show. You have a good karma.
Good karma?
I think so. Well...
Some of you might ask, how is this food related? If I know.